So before I start the tutorial, I did want to talk a little bit about sizing. So if you came from my TikTok, then you probably have seen this one that I made, which is the one that I made originally, but I kind of didn't really like how loose the stitches were, if that makes sense. I just don't think it looks very neat, and I did think it was a little bit too loose of a fit as well. So for this tutorial, I made this one, which is obviously a little bit longer, and it is smaller, or like it does have less width than the original one that I made. And the difference between these two is just the fact that this was made on 3.75 millimeter needles and this was made on 3.5 millimeter needles. Also, I think because this project was my first project working in Continental, I think my tension was also really bad, which is why it looks really funky. But this one, I'd say, looks a lot neater. And just for reference, the gauge for the new and improved version of the pattern is 16 stitches by 32 rows for a 10 by 10 centimeter swatch. And then also for reference, the circumference of my head is 55 centimeters. So if your head is significantly smaller or larger, then you might want to change the amount of stitches you cast on in the beginning. Just make sure that you are casting on in a number that is divisible by 4, because as you can see when we're working in the crown, we're going to be doing 4 different increases, so you're going to want something that's divisible by 4. But I do think that this hat should fit the average adult head. As you can see, it is stretchy, and obviously you can alter the length that you want to work to depending on your desired fit. But yeah, in terms of the circumference, I would say it should be good for everyone, but if you want it to be significantly larger or smaller, or not even significantly, but if you just want it to be larger or smaller, then just alter the amount of stitches that you're casting on. And the materials that you'll need are a 3.5 millimeter circular needle or whatever size needle meets gauge, and then a total of 60 grams of a DK weight yarn, preferably a merino wool. That will mean that you will need at least 30 grams of each color that you're working in, because you will use an equal amount of each color. And then you also just want some stitch markers for the decreases, and also if you want to mark like 10 stitch increments for the color work, then I would also recommend having stitch markers for that. But yeah, that is pretty much all you need. And the written pattern will also be linked in the description below, and that is also where you will find the chart for the color work, and I would also just recommend having that to kind of refer back to also while following along with the tutorial. And I also will have some links to some tutorials like from other creators that I found to be helpful when learning how to double knit, because I'm not super confident that I was able to really go in depth on how to do certain things. So if you have any questions, I would first try to see if some of them may be answered through those tutorials, and if not, always just feel free to comment and I will try my best to answer. To start off, make a slip knot with both strands of yarn and put it on your needle. Keep in mind that this slip knot will not count as a stitch. We're going to be dropping it before joining in the round. Now we're going to start casting on, and you're going to want to grip both strands of yarn similar to how you would for a long tail cast on. We're going to start off by casting on a knit stitch of color A, and casting on a purl stitch of color B. So once again, we're going to cast on a knit stitch, and cast on a purl stitch. Continue alternating between casting on a knit stitch of color A and a purl stitch of color B until you have 72 stitches of each color, meaning you'll have a total of 144 stitches on your needles. So I've finished casting on here, and as you can see, I have put a stitch marker at every 10 stitches. This is just to make it easier to count and also do the color work later on, but this is a optional step. And since I'll be working in the magic loop for this project, I'm going to count 36 stitches of each color, and then after the 36th stitch, I'm just going to pull through and prepare to join the round. After I've made sure that everything is aligned, nothing is twisted, I'm just going to drop that first slip knot and pull through the back needle so we can start knitting. When holding your yarn, you're going to want to take both strands, and I like to put my middle finger through them to separate them to avoid them twisting while I'm working. And make sure that color A, so the color that you're knitting, is to the left, and then color B, the color that you will be purling, is to the right. And then you're just going to knit color A, and then bring both strands forward and purl in color B. Now bring both strands back behind the needle, and then knit color A again, both strands to the front, and purl color B. If you're working in English style, just make sure that you're bringing both strands of yarn to the front for the knit stitch, and then both strands of yarn to the front for the purl stitch, kind of how you would for ribbing. Continue alternating between knitting in color A and purling in color B until the end of the round, and you're actually going to continue doing this for 4 rounds. Something to look out for when you're working in the magic loop is making sure that the yarn is not twisted when you're switching between needles. So this would be the correct way, and then something like this would mean that it's twisted, and it would result in color B showing up in like the front side and vice versa. So once again, just make sure that color A is in the front like so, and color B is in the back. As you can see, I've completed 4 rounds of regular double knit, and now we are ready to start on our color work. This is the chart that I've created for the spiral design. I will have it linked down below in the description as part of the free written pattern. So as you can see, the first row calls for 16 stitches of regular double knit, and then we will be switching colors and knitting in color B until the 28th stitch, and I will show you how to do that. So I've gone ahead and knit 18 stitches of regular double knit, and now I am ready to switch colors. I'm now going to alter my grip of the yarn so that color B is to the left and color A is to the right, and now I can knit in color B and purl in color A, and I will continue doing that until the end of the color B knit part of the color work. And you'll probably notice that every time you switch colors, there will be a double of a single color. So in this case, there's a double of color B because we started knitting in color B. And keep in mind that you should never have more than 2 of the same color stitch in a row. So for example, if you have like 3 or 4 of the same color in a row, then you might be doing something wrong. But yeah, that's pretty much everything you need to know for doing the color work. Just remind yourself that you will never change the order of knitting and purling. The only thing that'll change is whether or not you're knitting in color A or knitting in color B and purling in color A or purling in color B. So now I've reached the 28th stitch, and I am ready to switch back to knitting in color A and purling in color B. So once again, I just switch my grip and then continue knitting color A and purling in color B. And once again we had that double where we switched colors. Now I'm just going to work until the end of the round and continue to follow the Colorwork chart until the Colorwork part is finished. And now that I've finished the color work, I'm just going to continue doing regular rounds of knitting in color A and purling in color B until I've reached my desired length. And the desired length is completely up to you. For this one in particular, I did work until I had 18 centimeters, but I would recommend anywhere in between 13 to 20 centimeters depending on how far down you want it to go. So as you can see, now I've finished and I've worked up until approximately the 18 centimeter mark, and now I'm ready to start working on my decreases for the crown. And now you're going to want to place your stitch markers. I've placed my stitch markers after the 8th, 10th, 26th, 28th, 44th, 46th, 62nd, and 64th stitches, so a total of 8 stitch markers. And you're going to be decreasing before and after the stitch markers, and then just regular knit color A and purl color B in between the stitch markers. Now you're just going to want to knit and purl as you regularly would until you have 2 stitches of each color left before the stitch marker, meaning you would have a total of 4 stitches left. And now that I've worked until I have 2 stitches of each color left before the stitch marker, I'm going to rearrange the stitches before I do the decreases. So I'm just going to slip them off and then back onto the needle so that I have 2 stitches of color A in a row and then 2 stitches of color B in a row. And now I'm just going to slip knit color A. And this one's a little bit tricky, but now you're going to purl 2 together through the back loop for color B. So what you'll do is insert your needle through the back loops of each stitch, and then once you do that, you can just purl as you normally would. And now just slip the stitch marker and then knit 1 color A, purl 1 color B, knit 1 color A, purl 1 color B, just as you regularly would. And then you're going to want to slip the other stitch marker and once again rearrange the stitches so that you have 2 stitches of color A in a row and 2 stitches of color B in a row. And now these decreases should be a lot easier. You're just going to knit 2 together for color A, and then purl 2 together for color B. And now you're just going to continue knitting in color A and purling in color B until once again you have 2 stitches of each color left before the next stitch marker. So once again I'm going to rearrange the stitches so that we have 2 stitches of color A and 2 stitches of color B next to each other. Then I'm going to slip knit color A and purl 2 together through the back loop for color B. And as you can tell, I kind of untwist the stitches before I do the decrease. And then once again, after I've slipped that stitch marker, I'm going to work normally. And then after this stitch marker, once again rearrange the stitches and now knit 2 together for color A and purl 2 together for color B. And now you're just going to want to repeat this process at every stitch marker until you've reached the end of the round. Once you finish the decrease round, you're just going to do one round of regular double knit, meaning just regular knitting color A and purling color B until the end of the round. And then you're going to want to continue alternating between a decrease round and then a non-decrease round until you have 16 stitches of each color left, meaning you will have a total of 32 stitches on your needle. Now I am finished with my decreases. I have 16 stitches of each color left, and I've decided to end on a non-decrease row, but you could also just end on the decrease row once you've reached the amount of stitches that you need. And now I'm just going to cut the yarn, and I'm going to leave a long tail so that we can sew the crown shut as well as weave in the ends. I'm going to start off by threading color A through a needle, and then I'm just going to pass the needle through every color A stitch. And once I'm finished, I'm just going to leave that as is for now without pulling through, and I'm just going to flip over the work and do the exact same thing for color B. And once I'm finished with weaving through color B, I'm just going to flip the work again and then pull the needles off. And then now you're just ready to pull the yarn tight and close the crown. And once you're done with one side, you can just do the exact same on the other side. Once again, just pull the yarn really tight, close the crown, and weave in the ends.